Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a few minutes to go over a quick review of the COVID-19 vaccine. When we are done with this presentation, I hope you can take away from this message that, like all vaccines, the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine has been rigorously tested. It means that there's been no steps skipped, right? So typically vaccines, you hear about these things called phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, etc. All of those sort of things have been done. Everyone sort of worries about that. Did we do this too quickly? We haven't. The big difference has been typically when a company sort of is developing a new vaccine or a medication, they take on all of the risk on their own, right? So they have to fund the research, they have to set up the technology to mass produce the medicine or the vaccine when it's ready. This time around, because both the US government and many governments around the world put in billions of dollars, it took some of the risk away from the manufacturers in going out and studying all of this vaccine technology and being able to develop the vaccine at a faster pace, but not necessarily skipping any of the steps that they have to go through in the old regular process and stuff. So I want to reassure everyone that that happened. The mRNA technology, though it's the first time we're sort of hearing about it in the regular media, it's not new. It's something that has been studied for more than a decade. A lot of the research in previous times were really done around cancer research. And because for this particular vaccine, it seemed to work in the development of the vaccine technology, they were able to take that existing technology that they already had been studying and repurpose it for the development of the new vaccine. There's no live virus in the mRNA vaccine, so there's no risk that the vaccine will give you the infection, right? So there are other vaccines that are what's known as live virus vaccines. So the chickenpox vaccine, the zoster vaccine, those are live virus vaccines. So they have little pieces of the actual virus in there to help your body develop an immune response. The mRNA vaccines have no live virus in it, so you cannot get the infection from the vaccine. And messenger RNA never enters what's called the nucleus of your cell, right? That's where the DNA is. So it doesn't do anything to affect your DNA, because I know that's a question that comes up fairly frequently. So why should we all get vaccinated, right? So we're at a very important time in history. We're at a very important time in our time going through this pandemic, right? So some of the thoughts that came to my mind was, why should I get the vaccine? Is I want to protect myself, I want to protect my family, I want to protect the community around me, and I want to set an example, right? So we're in healthcare, right? So we, everything we do, patients look up to us, our colleagues look up to us, our coworkers look up to us, our families may look up to us, right, for answers because we're in the healthcare field. So I think this is a great way for us to set an example for everybody. So like I said previously, the COVID-19 vaccines that we currently are discussing have gone through all of the usual steps in order to ensure that the vaccines and the medication are safe. There are two major agencies that sort of regulate the safety of medications and vaccines in America, right? So there's the Food and Drug Administration, known as the FDA. So they go through reviewing all of the clinical trial material, right? So the private companies do the research, they collect the data, then they put the data up for a panel of experts that are on not just all government employees. So they are experts in the field who are reviewing the data and making a recommendation. And then based on that, the Federal Food and Drug Administration decides if they're going to do an emergency authorization or not. So these vaccines went through those regular processes. The other major governmental agency that reviews safety is what's known as the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at the CDC. Again, this is a panel of experts, not just government employees, right? So they are national experts on the topic. So if it's immunology, if it's vaccines, if it's medications, they're national experts on this topic who've reviewed the data that's available and make a recommendation. So when these two separate groups of people have looked at all the safety data, only after that does a recommendation come out about who should be getting the vaccines, when should those vaccines be used, what are the contraindications, et cetera. So both these vaccines that we're going to be talking about briefly have gone through these processes in the United States. And to be reassured, it's actually gone through the similar processes in Canada, in Europe, in other parts of the world where the vaccine has also started to be approved and stuff. So there are safety mechanisms in place. And it's not that I've approved the vaccine and everything stops. So they will continue to monitor, just like they do with all medications and all vaccines. They will continue to monitor any rare side effects, right? So they've done trials in a certain number of people. A certain number of people have already gotten the vaccines, and they will continue to do this monitoring as it continues onwards. So in the initial trials, typically, an average vaccine kind of study, if you can enroll about 3,000 people in that study, it's considered a good population to start with. So for both of these vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, which are the two mRNA vaccines we're talking about, there were almost 60,000 people enrolled in the trials, right? And in the old days, the problem used to be that it used to be not a diverse group of people that entered trials. And in this case, they were actually able to go out there and enroll a nice spectrum of people that were racially and ethnically diverse in both these trials, as you can see. They were also able to sort of intentionally focus on the older age groups, because that's where we know people were having the most adverse effects of getting the COVID infection, right? So they really focused on that over 65 age group while they recruited patients to come into the vaccine trials. So the first two vaccines that have hit the market that I'm sure all of us have started to hear about in the news is the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Both of these use similar technology known as mRNA, right? So I tried to think about how can I simply explain what an mRNA is. So it basically is just a messenger, which is carrying instructions to our body to make pieces of the COVID spike protein, right? So everyone's sort of seen that little picture on the TV channels with the little round and the little pegs that come out of it. Those little pegs that come out of that round structure is known as the spike protein, right? As far as we know so far, that spike protein seems to be the same in the different mutations that we're hearing about that have previously happened, and then people are talking about currently that's happening in the United Kingdom and in South Africa, right? So that spike protein seems to have stayed the same, which means that these vaccines should continue to work against the variants of the COVID virus that's out there. I think I mentioned this earlier as well. The vaccines do not interact with our DNA. So it does not have any implications on our genetics. And the messenger RNA that is inserted into our body breaks down pretty aggressively. So it disappears from our body fairly quickly. Both of these vaccines require 2 doses. So the Pfizer vaccine, which is mostly being right now administered in hospital settings, it's 21 days apart. And the Moderna vaccine, which places like FQHCs have started receiving as of yesterday, have to be given 28 days apart. Right now, we have to use the same vaccine for both of those injections. So, sometimes in other vaccines, we can use the different companies' vaccines interchangeably. Currently, because they haven't been studied like that, we can only use the same vaccine for both doses. If I got the first dose of Moderna, I have to get the second dose with the Moderna vaccine as well. So how effective are these vaccines? So this has been a very reassuring from what the studies have come out, is that both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine are well over 90% effective. They're close to 95% effective. And they were able to show the same effectiveness in different races, ethnicities, and age. So that's very reassuring as we go forward. So what are some of the side effects, right? So like we talked about before, because there is no live virus in the vaccine, you cannot get COVID-19 from the vaccine. In the initial clinical trials that were done in those 65,000 or so patients, there were no severe side effects reported in any of those trials, right? So the most common things are the most common things. So if you think about a flu shot, most people sort of complain about, they may get some pain where they got their shot. They may get a little bit of tiredness or numbness in that arm, muscle pain. So all of those kind of things are the most common side effects with both of these vaccines as well, right? With the Pfizer vaccine, sometimes you can also have some joint pain or fever. The Moderna vaccine, the one thing that struck out to me that's a little different is you can also get some lymph node swelling in the same arm that you got the shot, right? So these are side effects. These are not adverse events. These aren't dangerous things. These are a way that your body is actually letting you know that your body's developing that immune response that we want it to. Most commonly, the side effects seem to be more common after people are getting their second dose compared to the first dose. If you think about the day you got the vaccine as day one, most commonly people feel some of these side effects day 2 to 3, and usually get better by day 4 or 5. So, within the next a couple of days after you get the vaccine, if you're going to get any side effects, you've already gotten your side effects and gotten better. And that's what most people experience during the trials and stuff. I know many people sort of have been asking about, but I've been hearing about the anaphylaxis. Everyone anaphylaxis, right? That's all the news wants to talk about and stuff. So as of yesterday, more than 500,000 doses have been given in the United States of the Pfizer vaccine. And right now, all we know about is there are 5 cases of anaphylaxis in the country. So 5 cases out of 500,000 doses given. And most of those 5 patients had a previous history of anaphylaxis. So there actually is a grid that providers should consider. And when it's your turn to get the vaccine, it'll be made available to you. So only people that have anaphylactic reaction to either a previous dose of the vaccine, a component that's in the vaccine, or to another injectable or a vaccine. If you have anaphylactic reaction to an injection, those are the only people that have an absolute contraindication, meaning they should not take the vaccine right now. People who have had anaphylactic reaction because they drank a medicine, so they took it by mouth, or if they have anaphylactic reaction because of like peanut allergies or food allergies or allergies to the environment, those are not considered absolute contraindications. You can still get the COVID-19 vaccine. You just have to be monitored for a longer period of time after you get it, just to make sure that you don't have any reactions and stuff. So, you can talk about that with the providers who are giving out the vaccines, or with your own private providers when you want to if you want to get more information about it. Most of these side effects that I talked about, it's a sign that your immune system is actually working. So like I sort of talked about, the messenger RNA is just bringing a message to your body, say, hey, look, these are what the spike proteins look like. Please make antibodies against it. Your body is actually doing all the work of making the antibodies, just like if you had gotten a natural infection, right? So your body is making antibodies to protect you against any future infection from the COVID-19 vaccine virus. So it's your immune system working. As your immune system works, you get sometimes, feel a little pain or fatigue or chills and all those sort of things. So that's a normal expected thing. The vaccine does not cause any of the common respiratory symptoms we sort of talk about. It doesn't make you cough or sneeze or, make you lose your taste or smell. But those are signs of a real infection. Those don't typically happen after you've gotten the vaccine. So there is a way to sort of tell the difference between vaccine-related stuff and actual infection-related stuff. So what we don't know right now, right? We don't know how long the immunity lasts for, right? Because the vaccine trials have been going on for about 4 to 6 months. All of COVID, as far as we know, has been going on for about a year, maybe, right? So we really don't know what happens after that year. So, sometimes after a particular vaccine is released, as we monitor the data over time, we may realize that we need to get additional doses, right? So that's what happened with the chickenpox vaccine. So I don't know how many people remember back when it first was rolled out. Most children were told to get 1 dose of the chickenpox vaccine. And then with time, we realized that the immunity was wearing off. So now the recommendation is that most people get 2 doses of the chickenpox vaccine. Similar thing with the flu vaccine, right? So because the flu is constantly changing, we can't just take one vaccine that protects us forever for right now. What we have to do is get a new flu vaccine each year to protect against the strain that's around at the time. So some of this information will only come with time as we learn more about the actual virus that's out there. Because the vaccines have only been studied for the most part in 18 and above, and the Pfizer vaccine in 16 and above to some degree, we don't know how effective the vaccine is in patients under 16. So right now, the Pfizer vaccine they're recruiting for patients 12 and above, and soon the Moderna folks will also probably do younger age groups, right? So we don't know how effective this vaccine is in younger people. We also don't know how effective it is in pregnant women, because typically when a medicine trial comes out or a vaccine trial comes out, not a lot of pregnant women volunteer to be in the studies, right? So because they're not in the studies, we don't know about it till later. That being said, both the American College of Gynecology actually says you should have a conversation with your provider. The technology used in making this vaccine does not seem to be something that previously we know of that affects the pregnant woman or the fetus. So it is safe to use the vaccine in pregnant women and in lactating women, so if you're breastfeeding. That is a current recommendation from the American College of Gynecology, but you should have a conversation with your own gynecologist or your doctor to make that final determination. The other thing we don't know right now is because this vaccine is newer, it's not usually been given with other vaccines, right? So we don't know how that affects each other. So out of an abundance of caution, the current recommendation is if you just got a regular vaccine, so like you got your chickenpox shot or your tetanus shot or one of those shots, you should wait 2 weeks, 14 days before you get the COVID-19 vaccine. Same thing that if you got the COVID-19 vaccine today, you should wait 2 weeks or 14 days before you get another routine vaccine. And again, this is not because we know that there's any danger to that. It's just because we don't have any data. So just out of a safe, to make it play it safe rather than sorry, they've recommended this 14-day buffer period around the COVID-19 vaccine. So you should only be getting the COVID-19 vaccine by itself. So currently, who's recommended to get the COVID-19 vaccine, right? So as I mentioned earlier, the Pfizer vaccine has primarily been distributed to hospitals, and it's authorized for people 16 years of age and older. The Moderna vaccine, which is primarily what's coming out to the federally qualified community health centers, is authorized for people 18 years and above currently. Right now, because there are more people that need vaccination than there are actual vaccines available, both at the federal level and at the state level, they've sort of put a priority list of who should be getting vaccinated first. And then as more vaccine is available, they add more people to that priority group. So both the ACIP from the CDC and New York State currently recommend that healthcare personnel and long-term care facility residents be offered vaccinations in the initial phase. So that's known as phase 1A. So that's where we're right now, is healthcare personnel in the FQHCs in hospitals are currently and in long-term care facilities are currently being offered the vaccinations in New York. We're waiting for additional doses to be available so we can expand it to other groups, right? So people have asked, can I bring my family in? Can I bring my parents in? So those will all come later as more additional recommendations come out. Right now, the gut feeling about most people is probably, March, April, or later is when the general public will probably have enough vaccine around to be administered to them and stuff. So, they're going to be focusing first on healthcare workers, then frontline workers, patients over 65, patients with other medical issues, and so forth, in determining who gets vaccines next. So some special considerations to think about, right? So if you've had a previous COVID-19 infection, so if you had an infection, let's say March or April or whatever, and you had your antibodies tested, so right now there is no recommendation that you should check your antibodies before getting a COVID-19 vaccine. This is just saying if you already had it done for some other reason, you should still get the COVID-19 vaccine when it's time. Right? When it's your turn, you should still get the vaccine because there are some early studies that seem to show that your body generates a stronger immune response after the vaccine than after a natural infection. That stronger response may lead to a longer term protection. So the recommendation is even if you had a previous infection with COVID and or you have antibodies in your blood already, you should still get the vaccine when it's your turn. If you have an infection right now, right? So you just went last week, got tested and you turned out positive, or you have symptoms and you got tested and you're positive, the recommendation is you should finish your isolation period of minimum of 10 days. You should start to feel better and then you should get the COVID vaccine, right? So when you're actually sick, wait it out, finish your isolation period, feel better, and then receive the COVID vaccine. Now, this last category I'm going to talk about is an optional, you may choose kind of category. So if you had a previous infection with COVID in the last 90 days, so not right now, but in the last 90 days, at some point you had a previous infection, or like the president, ended up in the hospital and you got a monoclonal antibody treatment anytime in that time frame, The current thought is that you may have some degree of protection for that 90-day window from the time you got infected or you got the monoclonal antibody. So you may choose to give up your spot in line and wait that 90-day window before you get your vaccine, right? So if there were two people, you guys work together, one of you's never had a COVID infection, one of you had a COVID infection 2 months ago, the person who had the COVID infection 2 months ago can volunteer to postpone their vaccination, right? So it's not that you have to postpone your vaccination. You can voluntarily choose to postpone your vaccination because this 90-day window may provide you some level of protection. I talked about earlier, pregnant and lactating women can choose to receive the COVID vaccine. You should discuss additional details with your own PCP or OBGYN, but the American College of Gynecology currently does recommend that you can receive the COVID-19 vaccine. If you're immunocompromised, right? So if you are undergoing cancer treatment, you're on long-term steroids, something that affects your immune system and makes it weaker. It's not that you cannot get the COVID-19 vaccine, it's that we just don't know how much of an immune response your body may be able to generate. So that is something where you may want to talk to your PCP on your specific condition, how immunocompromised you may be, to sort of determine what's the best time to get the COVID-19 vaccine, right? One of the other things that I've seen come across in social media and in the newspapers and stuff like that is talking about, is there aborted material in the vaccines? There is no fetal material in either the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. The mRNA is created synthetically in a lab, right? So there is no fetal material in there. If you're someone of religious following, the Catholic Church, the Pope actually released guidance earlier this week, allowing Catholics to also receive any version of the vaccine as well and stuff. So just something I wanted to put out there because I have seen some of that in the media. So how do we know, I got the vaccine, how do I know that, like bad things won't happen, right? So all vaccines have always had a system in place called VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It's a system that anyone can report any sort of adverse reaction after you get your vaccine, right? So when you usually, if you took your children to get your shots, they usually give you this sheet called a BIS sheet that talks about, what's the vaccine for, what does it protect you for, how often, how many doses you have to get, et cetera, et cetera. And on there, they talk about if you have some sort of adverse reaction, you can report it to the VAERS system, right? So that's how we keep track of, after some product has been licensed, after a vaccine has been licensed in the United States, are there any unexpected things happening once it's out in the general public, right? So the VAERS system has always been there. It continues for the COVID-19 vaccine as well. In addition, because technology has gotten faster and stuff, right? So now there's a smartphone app, like there's a smartphone app for everything, right? So there's a new thing that the CDC put together called vSafe. So when you get your vaccine, you'll be given information about how you can register for the vSafe program. The first time, so if you have a smartphone, you can do it right on your smartphone. The first time you have to go to a website and you sort of provide some basic information about, name, date of birth, when you got the vaccine, which vaccine did you get. Once you enroll in the program, you get a text alert every day for the first week, checking on you. And it sort of will ask you things like, how are you feeling today? If you have any symptoms, to list the symptoms. Are you having fever, list, et cetera. Has that kept you from going into work, et cetera, and record those sort of symptoms. So it's a way for, in real time, for the CDC to monitor what's happening with people who have received the vaccine. So you get a daily text for the first week, then a weekly text for 6 weeks, and you get another text at 3, 6, and 12 months. When you get your second dose, all of these timelines reset. So after the second dose, you again start getting weekly texts for the first week and so forth and so forth. My wife received her vaccine because she works in a hospital setting last Friday. We signed up for the vSafe program. So every day she gets an alert asking her about how things are going. And I'm happy to report she's doing perfectly fine. She had a little bit of arm soreness on the first day, and after that, she was perfectly fine. So now we're all getting vaccinated, so we can just stop doing all this craziness we've had to do for the last 8 or 9 months, right? Unfortunately not, right? Because although the vaccine is very effective, it's not 100%, right? So even at 95 or 94%, that means 5, 6, 10% of the population, even who got vaccinated, may not be fully protected, right? Not everyone's going to get the vaccine on day one, right? Because there's more people that need the vaccine than vaccine that's currently available. So it's going to take a slow amount of time where you're going to have a mix of people that have been vaccinated, people who are not vaccinated, people who've gotten both doses, people who got the first dose. So we need to continue to wear our masks, all the other PPEs that we need to have on, continue with social distancing and using all the other precautions. So, if things go well, if all of us get vaccinated, the anticipation from people like Dr. Fauci is, late summer, early fall of next year, we may be able to sort of do some of the things that we used to consider normal before this pandemic hit us. So how is UHP going to be rolling this out, right? So as you know, there's limited quantities of the vaccine currently available, right? So it's right now restricted to associates only, not for our patients. The initial group, so there's a grid that the state has put out that we have to follow that ranks each kind of physician. So just because you're a physician doesn't mean you're the same as all physicians, right? So it depends on the environment you're working in, whether you're doing in-person, how much direct care, respiratory clinic versus not respiratory clinic, et cetera. So there's a grid that the state has helped put out and that we've incorporated for all of our associates. So in-person associates, hybrid associates, associates working at home, completely remotely. When we talk about associates, it's not just directly on UHP payroll. It's all the people in our building, so the facilities folks, the housekeeping folks, the security staff, et cetera. So we've come up with this grid. We're going to be starting off, and by the time this presentation comes out, we've already done our first set of highest risk group who've started receiving the vaccine already. And subsequently, additional teams will be notified. So what the process right now is, as we come down this list of groups and the amount of vaccines that are available, we'll be reaching out to groups of, so they all have to be broken down in packs of 10 because each vial contains 10 doses. And we don't want to waste any vaccine, right? So we're scheduling 10 people per vial in groups of 10 for the vaccination. So we end up using all the vaccines that we have available. So look forward for getting an email notifying you that your group is now the next group that's ready for vaccination. And then you'll get a follow-up email that gives you a specific time and location for your an appointment time to come to get your vaccine, and you'll come and get your vaccine and stuff. Vaccination is not mandatory, but we highly recommend it. It is one of the key ways we're going to get out of this pandemic. Whenever possible, we're going to try to come out to the departments to give the vaccine, but it sort of will depend on the location, the department and stuff. So details will come in the emails that are going to be coming out. Not everyone in the department is going to get vaccinated at the same day, right? Because there is this possibility of 2 or 3 days later, some of you may have a sore arm and feel a little down. We don't want to give it to everyone in the department and potentially have the whole department not be able to work because they have sore arms and feel fatigued, right? So there's going to be a staggered pattern in how even within a department or a site that people will get vaccinated. As more supplies start coming in, vaccine-wise, we'll be sort of speeding up the process of who gets the vaccination, again, in the staggered format. And then down the line, come March, April, maybe when it's ready for the general public, obviously we'll be rolling it out much more aggressively to the general public as well. If you have any questions, please email this group, covid-questions@urbanhealthplan.org. I hope this presentation gave you a brief review of what's out there and stuff. If additional questions come by, please email the group. We'll try to answer those questions either directly or through future presentations. We're currently working on bringing in outside experts to also speak to all of us about more details about the vaccines, especially as we get more additional information. So I look forward to having a robust response from everybody. I can't wait till it's my turn to get the vaccine, and I'm looking forward to all of us having a safe experience through this and hopefully back to normal sooner rather than later. Again, thank you very much for paying attention.